She was just a silhouette in the blizzard, a fragile shadow against the endless white. But every step she took was a vow, a promise to the man who once carried her on his shoulders through the same snowy woods. Now, she was walking alone. 30 miles. To find his grave. The snow had started falling 2 days ago, thick and unrelenting. By the time Ellie reached the last bus stop at the edge of town, everything ahead was buried. The road to Hollow Ridge Cemetery had long since disappeared under a white sheet, and the plow trucks hadn't been out in hours. She stood there, 23 years old, with a backpack slung over one shoulder and her father's old army jacket wrapped tightly around her. The cemetery was 30 miles away, too far to walk in the storm, people said. Too dangerous. But Ellie had come too far to turn back now. She had flown across the country, left her job behind, and braved this storm for one reason only, to say goodbye. It had been 4 years since her father, Jack Lawson, had passed away. 4 years since the war took more than just his breath. It took the laughter from their home, the strength from her mother's eyes, and the glue that had held their small family together. She had been in college when he died. Too far away. Too late. They buried him without her. Now, after all this time, she was ready to face him. To speak to the headstone she never saw. To lay a single flower and whisper the apology that had burned inside her since that day. And so she walked. The first few miles were manageable. Ellie stuck close to the railroad tracks, remembering stories her dad used to tell her as a child, how the tracks always led somewhere, even when the road disappeared. But the snow was deep, sometimes up to her knees, and every gust of wind stung her cheeks like glass. Still, she pressed on. By mile 10, her legs were cramping, and her fingers had gone numb, even through 2 pairs of gloves. A passing truck stopped once, the driver shouting over the wind that she was crazy. "You'll freeze to death out here," he yelled. But when she refused a ride and told him where she was going, he just nodded and handed her a thermos of hot coffee before driving off. She found shelter in an old hunter's shack that night, half buried in snow and forgotten by time. There was no firewood, just a broken cot and 4 walls that groaned under the wind's pressure. She curled up on the floor, clutching the thermos like a lifeline, whispering into the silence. "Tomorrow, Dad. I'll see you tomorrow." The second day was worse. The blizzard had grown fiercer, and visibility dropped so low she could barely see a few feet ahead. Trees loomed like ghosts. Her phone had long since died, and her body screamed with exhaustion. At one point, she felt slip down a slope hidden beneath snow and rolled into a frozen creek. The cold stole her breath. She lay there, soaked and shivering, staring up at the gray sky. Tears burned her eyes, but they froze on her cheeks before they could fall. She could hear her father's voice in her head. "You're Lawson tough, Ellie. You're stronger than the storm." She dragged herself out of the creek, teeth chattering, legs shaking. She stripped off her soaked socks and replaced them with the dry pair from her backpack, then wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck and forced herself onward. Her lips were blue. Her breaths were shallow. But her will, her purpose, was the only fire still burning. By dusk, she saw it. The iron gate of Hollow Ridge Cemetery. Black and stoic against the endless snow. She stumbled through the gate, her feet barely lifting off the ground anymore. The rows of graves stretched before her like a sea of memory, each stone rising from the earth like a frozen echo. Her father's grave was near the back, under the shadow of a lone pine tree. He had always liked trees, especially the evergreens. Her knees gave out before she reached it. She crawled the last few steps. And then she saw his name. Jack Lawson. Father. Soldier. Hero. A small American flag stuck out from the snow beside the stone. Someone had been there before. But now, it was just her and him. She sat in front of the grave, placed the single white rose she had carried all the way from New York on the snow, and pressed her forehead to the cold stone. "I'm sorry I didn't make it before," she whispered. "I didn't know how to say goodbye. But I'm here now. I love you, Dad." The wind howled around her, but for a moment, she felt warmth. Not in her body, but in her soul. When she didn't return to town by the next day, a search party was sent out. They found her curled up by her father's grave, frostbitten but alive, her head resting gently on the tombstone. She was taken to the hospital, treated, and hailed as a miracle. But Ellie didn't care about the attention. She had done what she came to do. She had faced the storm. She had faced the grief. And she had said goodbye. Epilogue. 2 years later, Ellie returned to Hollow Ridge again, this time not on foot, but by car. The snow was falling again, light and soft like feathers. She stood in front of her father's grave with a little boy in her arms, her son, Jack Jr. "He never met you," she whispered, brushing snow off the stone, "but I'll tell him every story. Every laugh. Every lesson." The boy reached out and touched the cold marble with chubby fingers. And just like that, the storm of yesterday became the strength of tomorrow.